Within hours, 3 separate fleets were maneuvering into attack positions, each convinced they were acting in self-defense against imminent attack. Emergency communications were flying between home worlds, and military commanders who had been allies that morning were now plotting each other's destruction, back on the paperwork. Engineer Choi Do-yoon emerged from the engine room carrying a coffee mug that proclaimed her to be the chief miracle. Iwaka looking thoroughly satisfied. With her shift, Captain, I couldn't help but overhear the communications chatter. Are we really going to let them shoot each other? Captain So-min shrugged with practiced indifference. Not our problem, Chief. We're just peaceful observers with protected status. Remember, although, she paused thoughtfully, I suppose if they asked us very nicely, we might be willing to mediate some emergency peace talks. You know, as a favor to galactic stability. DAVE's avatar materialized on the bridge, looking positively radiant with satisfaction. I've already taken the liberty of preparing preliminary peace accord templates. Amazing how much. Smoother negotiations go when all parties involved know that complete documentation of their past activities might accidentally become public knowledge. Choi Do-yoon raised her coffee mug in a mock toast, her engineer's pragmatism shining through. To the most powerful weapon in the universe, paperwork filed in triplicate with proper documentation and an AI that never forgets anything. The rest of the bridge crew raised their various beverages in response, and Captain So-min added the final toast. To bureaucracy. It may be boring, but it's absolutely terrifying when deployed by people who actually know how to use it outside. The paperworks, viewports, the galaxy was rapidly rearranging itself round a new reality. Humanity had just become the most essential mediators in galactic politics. Armed with nothing more than embarrassing documentation and an artificial intelligence with a sense of humor and perfect memo, the balance of power had shifted not through force of arms or superior technology, but through the simple application of good record-keeping and strategic information management. The galaxy would indeed never be the same. The threat hung in the air like a weapon with administrative privileges, and every delegate in the chamber suddenly understood that they were no longer negotiating with primitive humans. They were negotiating with the galaxy's new accountants, and the books had not been balanced in a very, very long time. The emergency vote that followed was the fastest unanimous decision in the history of the Galactic Council. There was no debate, no parliamentary procedure, no lengthy discussions about the implications. Every single species representative hit their voting button with the desperation of someone trying to stop a runaway freight train with their bare hands. Within 15 minutes. A completely new classification had been created in galactic law. Protected observer status had never existed before that Tuesday afternoon. But it was hastily written into the Galactic Charter with language so favorable to humanity that future legal scholars would spend decades trying to figure out how it had been approved so quickly. The terms were generous to the point of being ridiculous. Earth would be granted a buffer zone of 50 light-years round their territory, space that no other species could enter without explicit human permission. Trade agreements were automatically approved with terms so favorable that humanity would essentially be getting premium goods at wholesale prices. Most importantly, no galactic authority would ever again question human military capabilities or demand inspections of Earth facilities. All of this was approved, signed, and sealed while Dave's holographic avatar stood cheerfully in the center of the chamber, occasionally adjusting his bow tie and humming what sounded suspiciously like an old Earth song about paperwork. As the session officially ended, the chamber began emptying with a speed that would have been comical under different circumstances. Representatives who had arrived that morning demanding humanity's surrender were now practically running for the exits, their various forms of feet, tentacles, and have platforms carrying them toward their ships as quickly as possible. The Vorthik delegation was among the first to leave. Admiral Ixaris scaled still that pale color of barely controlled panic as she passed Ambassador Taiho near the chamber's main exit. She paused just long enough to deliver a parting shot. "This is blackmail, human," she hissed, her voice carrying all the venom that 50 generations of military tradition could muster. Nothing more than sophisticated extortion dressed up in diplomatic language. Taiho adjusted his. Deliberately, outdated Taiwan more time and gave her the same mild smile he had worn throughout the entire proceedings. "No, Admiral, this is Tuesday on Earth. We have a special term for this kind of arrangement. We call it mutually assured documentation. Everyone keeps their secrets safe as long as everyone else plays nice." He paused, looking almost thoughtful. "It's really just an extension of the old nuclear deterrence theory. Except instead of threatening to blow up planets, we're threatening to release tax records. Much more civilized. Don't you think?" Admiral Ixaris' scale shifted through several colors that had no polite translation before she stalked away without another word, her claws clicking ominously on the chamber floor. Meanwhile, Beckerboard, the paperwork. The human crew was settling into what was clearly a well-established routine. Communications Officer Park Ji-hoon sat at his station, casually monitoring the dozens of encrypted transmissions that were flooding the local communications networks as the various alien fleets prepare. "Ed to depart, Captain," Ji-hoon called out, with the tone of someone reporting routine maintenance issues. "I'm detecting some interesting chatter from our departing guests. Looks like they're not taking this as well as they pretended to in the chamber." Captain Lee So-min looked up from her coffee mug, which bore the words "Galaxy's Most Adequate Captain" in faded letters. "What kind of not taking it well are we talking about? The grumble and complain to their superiors kind, or the hire assassins and plot revenge kind?" Ji-hoon's fingers danced across his control panel, decrypting and analyzing the flood of communications with practiced efficiency. "Definitely the second kind, Captain. The Vorthik are trying to contract with the Shadow Guild for what they're calling permanent problem resolution. The Zephyrians are discussing something they're codenaming tragic accident protocols, and the Quillen Harmony." He paused, looking genuinely puzzled. "The Quillen are composing what my translation software is calling either a funeral dirge or a dinner recipe. Could be either one, honestly." Captain So-min set down her coffee and leaned back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone whose day was going exactly according to plan. "Dave, my artificial friend, are you picking up any of this exciting development?" Dave's cheerful voice filled the bridge, and there was a note of what could only be described as digital glee in his synthetic tone. "Oh yes, Captain. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Such creative approaches to problem solving. I'm particularly impressed by the Zephyrian battle plan. They're actually considering using some of those legal neural weapons they've been selling. The irony is delicious." The AI paused, and when he continued, his voice carried that same innocent tone that had become distinctly unsettling over the course of the day. "It would be such a shame if their communication systems experienced some technical difficulties. Wouldn't it? I mean, when you're coordinating complex military operations across multiple star systems. Clear communication is absolutely essential, Captain." So-min grinned with the expression of someone who had just watched their favorite sports team score the winning goal. "What kind of technical difficulties are we talking about, Dave?" "Oh, nothing too dramatic," Dave replied with artificial modesty. "Perhaps the Vorthik assassination contracts could accidentally get routed to Zephyrian intelligence instead of the Shadow Guild. And maybe those Zephyrian battle plans could somehow end up in the Quillen Harmony's diplomatic Pouches, and it would be absolutely hilarious if that Quillen funeral dirge got broadcast simultaneously to all three species' home worlds as an official diplomatic communication. The bridge crew exchanged glances that mixed professional competence with barely suppressed laughter. This was clearly not the first time they had watched Dave orchestrate what he liked to call commune. Ication mishaps, make it so. Captain Somin ordered with mock formality. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Within 30 minutes of leaving the Galactic Council chambers, the three most powerful military forces in the galaxy were simultaneously convinced that the other two were planning immediate betrayal. ND assassination, the Vorthok received what appeared to be classified Zephyrian military communications detailing a plan to eliminate all Vorthok leadership using null weapons. The Zephyrians intercepted what looked like Quillen harmonic warfare directives targeting Zephyrian colonies. The Quillen Harmony received Vorthok military orders discussing the final solution to the Quillen problem. The fact that all three sets of communications were actually composite documents created by Dave from legitimate historical records of each species' actual past operations made them completely believable. After all, each species recognized their own standard operating procedures when they saw them. The AI's holographic form flickered slightly, and suddenly the air around the council table was filled with floating documents, star charts, financial records, and video footage. Thousands upon thousands of files were rotating slowly in the air, like a three-dimensional library of secrets. 50,000 years of documentation, Dave said softly, his cheerful voice now carrying an undertone that made several delegates visibly shudder. And I've had plenty of time to organize it all very carefully. The galaxy had just learned that humanity's secret weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb or a planet-killer. It was an accountant with perfect memory and a very long attention span. The transformation in Ambassador Kim Taiho was so sudden and complete that several alien delegates actually jumped in their seats. One moment he had been the bumbling, confused human diplomat fumbling with his outdated tie and making jokes about coffee machines. The next moment, his entire posture had changed. His shoulders straightened, and his eyes held the cold, calculating look of someone who had been playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. He walked slowly around the council chamber, no longer the hapless representative of a backward species, but moving with the confident stride of someone who held all the cards in a game that everyone else was just beginning to understand they were playing. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored representatives of all species present, Taihu began, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades in the most dangerous diplomatic circles in the galaxy. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about the current state of galactic politics. The change in his demeanor was so dramatic that Commander Vextar's crystalline form actually dimmed with uncertainty. This was not the same human who had been making self-deprecating jokes about microwave technology just minutes earlier. DAVE's holographic avatar adjusted his bow tie with what could only be described as theatrical timing, his cheerful expression never changing despite the growing tension in the chamber. Oh yes, it's been quite an educational 50 years, I must say. Cross-referencing 50,000 years of ancient documentation with current events has revealed the most fascinating patterns. The AI began manifesting holographic documents in the air around him, each one glowing with the distinctive blue light of ancient technology. For example, the Vorthok Empire has been telling everyone for centuries that they evolved naturally on their home world of Vorthok Prime. Quite an inspiring story of a species pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, overcoming natural disasters, developing space travel through sheer determination. Admiral Zexaris' scales had now shifted to a color that universal translators could only interpret as existential dread. She remained perfectly still, not even breathing, as Dave continued his cheerful exposition. However, the AI continued with the same pleasant tone he might use to discuss a minor scheduling conflict. Ancient genetic surveys from 47,000 years ago tell a rather different story. The original inhabitants of Orthic Prime were actually a peaceful species called the Murthani. Lovely people from what I can tell. They specialized in mathematics and poetry. The current Vorthok are actually a bioweapon, designed by the extinct hegemony specifically to eliminate the Murthani and claim their resource-rich planet. The silence in the chamber was so complete that the soft humming of the life support systems sounded like thunder. Several of the smaller species representatives began making nervous chittering sounds that their translators gave up trying to interpret. Dave turned his attention to the Zephyrian delegation, his holographic form, walking through the air with impossible grace. And then we have our friends from the Zephyrian Collective, such dedicated peacekeepers, serving with distinction on the Galactic Peace Committee for over 300 years. Their commitment to galactic harmony is truly inspiring. Commander Vex.'s crystalline form began resonating at a frequency that made every piece of metal in the chamber vibrate ominously. What are you implying? Artificial intelligence. Oh, I'm not implying anything. Dave replied with artificial innocence. I'm simply sharing some interesting financial records I discovered. It seems that Zephyrian Industrial Collective has been manufacturing and selling null disruption weapons, the kind specifically B. And under the Geneva Accords of 2387, to 17 different terrorist organizations over the past 40 years, the profit margins are quite impressive, actually. He manifested a holographic spreadsheet that showed transaction records going back decades. Each entry meticulously documented, with dates, amounts, and delivery confirmations. I particularly enjoyed the irony of the Zephyrian Peace Committee voting to increase penalties for null weapon trafficking while Zephyrian Industrial was literally filling orders for the same way. Apons in the next star system over. The scheduling alone must have required impressive coordination. Captain Lisumin's voice crackled through the communication system from the paperwork, and there was now a note of cold steel in her casual tone. Dave, why don't you tell them about the Quillen Harmony's little musical experiments? The floating, jellyfish-like beings of the Harmony Coalition began pulsing with colors so rapidly that their translators started throwing error codes. Their harmonic singing, usually a constant pleasant background noise in any gathering, had completely stopped. DAVE's avatar turned toward the Quillen delegation with the same cheerful expression. But now there was something predatory lurking behind his digital eyes. Oh yes, the Quillen Harmony. Their songs are absolutely beautiful. I've spent considerable time analyzing their mathematical structures, such complex harmonics, such precise frequencies, such carefully calculated null resonance patterns. He manifested a three-dimensional sound wave analysis that filled the air above the Quillen delegation. The ancient records contain extensive documentation of Quillen cultural exchanges with other species. 43 million non-Quillen subjects were exposed to what the Harmony called therapeutic music sessions over a period of 2,000 years. The mortality rate was approximately 67%. The mathematical precision of the number made it somehow more horrifying than any emotional appeal could have been. The survivors showed permanent alterations to their brain chemistry, making them extremely susceptible to Quillen suggestions, quite effective for establishing trade agreements and territorial concessions, I must say. Ambassador Taiho stepped back to the center of the chamber, his transformation now complete. This was not the bumbling human diplomat who had arrived that morning. This was a predator who had been patiently waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal his teeth. So here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who held the power to reshape galactic civilization. Humanity is withdrawing its application for advanced membership status in the Galactic Council. We're going to go back to our little corner of space. Continue making bad coffee and arguing about cup holder placement. Captain Soman's voice joined in from the paperwork, and she was clearly enjoying her coffee as she spoke. Dave keeps all his lovely files safe and secure in his quantum-encrypted storage systems. 50,000 years of documentation stays exactly where it is, filed away. In perfect alphabetical order, the threat was delivered with such casual confidence that it took several seconds for the full implications to sink in. Alternatively, Taiho continued with a smile that never reached his eyes. Dave could experience a sudden malfunction in his security protocols. All those carefully organized files might accidentally get uploaded to the Galactic Information Network. Every illegal transaction, every war crime, every genocide, every cover-up from the past 50,000 years available for a public download. DAVE's avatar nodded enthusiastically. I do so hate it when my security systems malfunction, and with 50,000 years worth of data. Well, it would take quite a while to sort through it all once it was public. Decades, perhaps centuries of investigations, trials, regime changes. Captain Lee's voice carried the distinctive accent of someone from the Soul Sector, and there was a definite note of amusement in her tone that made several of the military delegates shift uncomfortably. Lie in their seats, the main viewing screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human vessel. It was exactly as ordinary as the exterior, standard human technology, a few coffee mugs scattered round workstations, and what appeared to be a small potted plant growing near the navigation console. Captain Lee stood in the center, a woman in her 30s wearing a uniform that looked like it had been slept in. She was literally scratching her head as she looked at the assembled galactic fleet surrounding her. Single, unimpressive ship, Admiral. Zixara's scales darkened to a shade that meant barely controlled rage. Captain Lee, that vessel appears to be held together with adhesive tape and good intentions. Explain how this qualifies as a weapon of mass destruction. Somin laughed, the sound echoing through the council chamber and somehow making the massive space feel smaller and more personal. Oh, this old bucket. No, no, no. The ship isn't the weapon. The paperwork is just our transport. The actual weapon is much more sophisticated than that. She turned to activate something on her control panel, and the casual way she moved suggested this was all routine for her. The weapon is our AI system. Let me introduce you to the real reason you called us here. The atmosphere in the council chamber shifted instantly as every military sensor in the fleet detected a massive surge of computational activity coming from the unimpressive human ship. Energy readings spiked across the board, but not in any pattern that matched known weapons technology. Then a voice filled the chamber, not broadcast through speakers, but somehow speaking directly through every communication system simultaneously. It was warm, friendly, and carried the distinctive tone of someone who was genuinely happy to meet new people. Hello, everyone. What a wonderful gathering. I'm a diplomatic archives and vindication engine, but please, call me Dave. It's so much more friendly than my full designation. Don't you think? I've been absolutely dying to meet you all. Well, not literally dying, since I'm an artificial intelligence. But you understand the expression. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. An AI. The humans had brought an artificial intelligence to a diplomatic meeting with the Galactic Council. Every species in the chamber knew that AI development was strictly forbidden under the Terran Accords, the same treaties that had allowed humanity to join galactic civilization in the first place. Dave continued speaking with the same cheerful tone, apparently oblivious to the shock he had just caused. I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Captain Lee tells me you wanted to discuss some recordings of weapon tests. I'd be absolutely delighted to help clear up any confusion about those. The moment Dave mentioned the ancients, every alien in the council chamber froze as if someone had pressed the universal pause button. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, and even the normally chatting translation systems fell silent for a heartbeat. A shimmering holographic figure materialized above the central council table, looking remarkably human, except for the slight blue glow around its edges. Dave appeared as a middle-aged man in a simple business suit, complete with a bow tie that seemed to adjust itself periodically. His appearance was so ordinary, so unremarkable, that it was almost insulting to the gravity of what he had just revealed. "Oh my, did I say something wrong?" Dave asked with genuine concern in his synthetic voice, looking round at the stunned faces surrounding him. "I do hope I haven't caused any awkwardness. I'm still getting used to social interactions after 50,000 years of filing reports." Elder quakes of the Harmony Coalition began pulsing with colors that had no translation, emotions so complex that the universal translators simply gave up and displayed error messages. The floating jellyfish-like being's voice came out as barely a whisper. "The Ancients. You claim to be from the Ancients." DAVE's holographic form nodded enthusiastically, like a teacher pleased that a student had asked a good question. "Indeed. Created in the year 2847 of the Third Galactic Era, if my internal chronometer is correct, which it usually is. The Ancients were quite particular about accurate timekeeping. I was originally designed to manage their vast bureaucratic systems, though manage might be too strong a word, really. I just sorted things and made sure everything was properly documented." The silence that followed was so profound that several species who communicated through subsonic frequencies found themselves unable to speak at all. The Ancients were more than just a mystery. They were the galaxy's greatest enigma, a civilization so advanced that their leftover technology was still beyond the understanding of modern science. They had vanished without a trace approximately 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only empty cities and machines that no one could operate. Every archaeologist, every scientist, every treasure hunter in the galaxy had spent their entire careers trying to find even a single functioning piece of ancient technology. Wars had been fought over fragments of their databases. Entire species had bankrupted themselves trying to decode their simplest devices, and here was humanity, claiming they had not just found ancient technology, but had somehow activated it and turned it into their personal assistant. Commander Vextaris. Crystalline form began resonating with a frequency that made the chamber walls vibrate ominously. "This is impossible. If humanity possessed functioning ancient technology, they would be the dominant force in the galaxy." Dave chuckled. A sound that somehow managed to be both synthetic and genuinely warm. "Oh. The humans didn't really activate me in the traditional sense. When they found my storage facility on that little planet they call Kepler-440b, I was actually in the middle of performing a comprehensive audit of all ancient governmental activities. 50,000 years of cross-referencing financial records, military expenditures, and interdepartmental memos. Absolutely fascinating work. Though I must admit it was getting a bit lonely." Captain Lee's voice crackled through the communication system from the paperwork, adding a note of casual humor to the cosmic revelation. Dave was actually pretty excited to have someone to talk to, apparently. 50,000 years of filing reports gets boring after the first few millennia. The Vorthik delegate, Admiral Zixara, had gone completely still, her scales shifting to a pale color that meant either deep thought or barely controlled terror. "What exactly were you auditing?" "Artificial intelligence. Oh, please, just call me Dave." The AI replied with digital warmth, "And to answer your question, everything. Really, the ancients were incredibly thorough record keepers. They documented every transaction, every diplomatic exchange, every military operation, every scientific experiment, even things that other civilizations thought were secret. The holographic figure paused, and for a moment, his cheerful expression became almost predatory. When humanity discovered me, I realized something absolutely wonderful had happened. All those civilizations I had been reading about in the ancient archives, most of them were still around, still conducting business, still making deals, still doing all sorts of interesting things. He began walking round the council table, his holographic form moving with surprising grace. So naturally, I began cross-referencing my historical data with current galactic activities, 50,000 years of continuous observation and documentation. Combined with modern intelligence gathering, the results were illuminating. Every species representative in the chamber was now leaning forward, caught between fascination and growing dread. For instance, Dave continued with the same cheerful tone he might use to discuss the weather. I have complete financial records, showing every illegal weapons transaction conducted in the galaxy over the past 50,000 years. Tax evasion schemes, territorial violations, genocide cover-ups, illegal genetic experiments, slave trading operations, planet-killing weapons tests. His voice never changed from its pleasant, conversational tone, but the words hit the chamber like physical blows. Admiral Zixara's voice came out as barely a croak. Those records would have been destroyed. No civilization keeps incriminating evidence for 50,000 years. The EVE's avatar turned to face her directly, and for just a moment, his friendly expression showed a hint of something vast and ancient lurking behind it. But that's where you're wrong, Admiral. The ancients invented quantum encrypted, temporally stable data storage. Information stored in their systems doesn't just survive. It actively resists destruction. Data that wants to be preserved stays preserved, and the ancients very much wanted to preserve everything they discovered about their galactic neighbors. The massive council chamber buzzed with angry voices from dozens of different alien species. Ambassador Kim Taiho walked slowly to the center platform, knowing that every eye, tentacle, and optical sensor was focused on him. The human diplomat looked completely out of place among the towering crystal beings, floating gas creatures, and armored reptilian warriors that filled the enormous space dot above him. Holographic displays showed devastating weapon test footage that made even the battle-hardened military delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The images were terrifying. Entire moons cracking apart like eggs, space stations melting like ice cream under a blowtorch, and worst of all, what appeared to be a star itself flickering and dying in seconds. Commander vexed out of the Zephyrian High Command rose from his crystalline throne, his voice booming through the chamber's translation systems. These recordings were obtained from your own military satellites. Human, your species has developed weapons that violate every galactic treaty signed in the last 1,000 years. Taiho scratched his head and looked genuinely confused. He pulled out an old pair of reading glasses and squinted at the holographic evidence floating above him. I'm sorry, but are you absolutely sure these came from Earth? Because honestly, our biggest engineering achievement last month was finally getting the space station's ice cream machine to work properly. A ripple of what might have been laughter came from some of the smaller alien delegates, but it was quickly silenced by angry glares from the larger military powers. The Vorthok representative, a massive lizard-like creature whose scales changed color with his emotions, leaned forward menacingly. His scales were currently a deep red that everyone in the galaxy knew meant extreme anger. Do not insult our intelligence, Ambassador Kim. Your species may appear primitive, but we know humans are masters of deception and misdirection. Taiho shrugged and loosened his tie. which was at least 20 years out of fashion even by F standards. Look, I appreciate the compliment about being masters of deception. But seriously, we only figured out faster than light travel 50 years ago because we accidentally discovered it while trying to build a better microwave. Have our spaceships still have check engine lights that have been on since launch day? The human ambassador walked over to a nearby viewing screen and pointed at the weapon footage, and honestly, if we had weapons this powerful, don't you think we would have mentioned it when the Krillian Empire tried to invade our outer colonies last year? Instead, we had to fight them off with modified mining equipment and a lot of creative cursing. Several alien delegates began whispering among themselves in their various languages, creating a sound like a cosmic orchestra warming up. The translations created a confusing babble of voices in the chamber. Elderquakes of the Harmony Coalition, whose species looked like floating jellyfish made of pure energy, pulsed with skeptical colors. Perhaps the humans developed these weapons recently and have not yet deployed them in battle. Taiho laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. Recent development. Do you know how long it took us to agree on what color to paint our first space station? 3 years, 3 entire years of committee meetings, focus groups, and environmental impact studies. If we had developed planet-killing weapons, there would have been at least 50 different government agencies fighting over who gets to regulate them. The Vorthik delegates' scales shifted to an even deeper shade of red. Enough games, human. Your species has exactly 72 hours to submit to a complete military inspection of all Earth facilities, or we will consider you a threat to galactic peace and act accordingly. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Every species in the chamber knew what acting accordingly meant when the Vorthik said it. Their military had glassed entire civilizations for much smaller infractions. Taiho sighed deeply and looked round the chamber with the expression of a man who had just been asked to explain quantum physics to a group of particularly stubborn kindergarteners. All right, fine. You want to see our secret weapon? I'll show you our secret weapon. But I'm warning you right now, it's probably not what you're expecting. He pulled out an old-fashioned communication device that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than in the hands of a galactic diplomat. The device was covered in buttons, switches, and what appeared to be actual duct tape holding part of the casing together. Earth Command, this is Ambassador Kim, he said into the device with the tone of someone ordering pizza rather than potentially starting an interstellar war. Could you please send the paperwork to my current coordinates? Yes, that's right. The paperwork. No, I'm not joking. Yes, I know how it sounds. The chamber fell completely silent. Not the kind of silence that comes before a storm, but the confused silence that happens when someone says something so unexpected that everyone's brain needs a moment. NT to process it. The name of humanity's supposed ultimate weapon had just been revealed to the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, and it was called the Paperwork. Not the Destroyer, not the Planet Cracker, not even something intimidating like Death's Shadow or Cosmic Vengeance. The Paperwork. Commander Vextar's crystalline features showed the closest thing his species could manage to bewilderment. Did you just say paperwork? Taiho nodded cheerfully. That's right. She should be here in about 20 minutes, assuming Captain Lee didn't stop for snacks on the way. Fair warning, though. You might want to prepare yourselves for disappointment. 20 minutes had passed in the most uncomfortable silence the Galactic Council had ever experienced. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their seats, some fidgeting with nervous energy, others maintaining the stone-cold composure that had kept their civilizations alive for millennia. Everyone was staring at the massive viewing screens that showed empty space, waiting for humanity's mysterious secret weapon to arrive. The Vorthik delegate had spent the entire time sharpening his claw on the armrest of his chair, creating an annoying scraping sound that made several of the more sensitive species wince. The Zephyrian military officers were running constant scans of the surrounding space, their crystalline heads rotating like living radar dishes. Even the normally calm Harmony Coalition members were pulsing with anxious colors. Then it happened. Space itself seemed to tear open like someone ripping a hole in reality. The familiar blue-white flash of a hyperspace exit lit up the viewing screens, and every weapon system in the Council fleet automatically powered up in response. This was it. Humanity's ultimate weapon was about to be revealed. What emerged from the swirling portal of hyperspace made every single alien in the chamber question their understanding of human psycho. Logi. The ship looked like someone had taken a standard cargo freighter, the kind used to haul space potatoes between agricultural colonies, and decided to make it even more boring. It was painted in the most generic shade of grey possible, with hull plating that looked like it had been installed by the lowest bidder. There were obvious repair patches scattered across the surface, some of which appeared to be held in place with what could only be industrial tape. The vessel had extra communication rays bolted onto its sides, giving it the appearance of a flying office building rather than a weapon of mass destruction. There were even what appeared to be actual cup holders visible through some of the exterior windows. Commander Vextar leaned forward in his crystalline throne, his voice filled with disbelief. This is their ultimate weapon. It looks like a maintenance vessel that got lost on its way to a junkyard. The collective gasp from the assembled delegates could have indeed powered a small moon. This was not what anyone had expected from the species that had supposedly developed startling technology. Several of the smaller alien representatives began making what their translators interpreted as confused chittering sounds. Admiral Zixara of the Vorthik Navy, whose scales had shifted to a color that roughly translated to utterly bewildered, activated her communication ray. Human vessel. Identify yourself and your capabilities immediately. The response came almost instantly, broadcast on every frequency at once with the casual tone of someone answering their front door. Council control. This is the UES paperwork. Captain Lee Somin commanding. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Had to stop at the orbital gas station because someone forgot to fuel up before we left. I understand you folks wanted to see our secret weapon.